First Sunday of Lent. Lent is a season in the church year where we prepare our hearts for 40 days, not including Sundays, leading up to the biggest day of the year, which is Resurrection Sunday, Easter. And I'm also today, I'm glad you're here today, because today I'm going to start a sermon series on experiencing Christ during this Lenten season. And I'm going to try to allow us to do that by using our 5 senses, the senses that God gave us. And we're going to try each week to experience Him through that. Next week it's going to be smell. And I actually broke out part of that today with these candles because of to make it smell a little nicer in here and get those ready. But today we're going to do it through hearing, our sense of hearing. And I want to start today, and maybe this is a fitting thing to ask since you all lost an hour of sleep last night, but are you guys sound sleepers? No? I see some heads saying yes and some no. Are you the kind of sleeper that if a bomb went off by the foot of your bed, you probably wouldn't even notice? Yeah? Some guys like that. I'm that way. Hope can confirm that. I'm that way. I could drink a mug of coffee 15 minutes before bed and I would still have no problem. This is the way I am. Now, my wife will toss and turn all night, but I'm snoozing away, snoring away. She can confirm that too. But I can remember a time when that wasn't the case, and it was last summer. I think it was towards the beginning of summer when we start having thunderstorms and things like that. And I remember it was about like 2:33 in the morning. And I was sound asleep, and a thunderstorm came up in the night. And I remember laying there totally asleep, and then the loudest crack of thunder I'd ever heard woke me up straight out of bed. I popped up. The light is, you know how it is when you wake up and there's a lightning storm and your whole room has this weird glow to it because of the lightning flashes. And I woke up and I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know if the roof was caving in or what was going on, the bombs going off. And I was just terrified, you know. And I'm not normally scared of storms, but when you're sleeping and all of a sudden you're woken that way, you know, it's a scary thing. It reminded me when I was a kid, because when I was a kid I was scared of thunderstorms. And that was the same fear that I felt. I was just almost trembling. It was kind of weird. And so I'm sitting there awake in bed, and you know how it is when there's a thunderstorm at night. You just have to kind of ride it out. There's not really anybody who can make it go away. But there is somebody who can make it go away. He didn't that night, but we're going to look at a time when he did do that. And that comes today from Mark chapter 4, verses 35 to 40. That's the story where Jesus and his disciples are going out across the lake in a boat. And if you want to get a very realistic picture of Jesus as God in the flesh of a man, this is a wonderful story because we see how exhausted Jesus is by ministry at this point. He has just finished preaching in the prior chapters to the people beside the lake. He's been healing, and who knows for how long. We know that people would just follow Jesus everywhere, crying out to him, asking for healing, asking to be taught. And he would do that. And at the beginning of our passage today, he says to those guys, his disciples, he said, come on, let's get in the boat and let's go to the other side of the lake. And as soon as he crawled into that boat, the master looked down and he saw a cushion in the stern of the boat. And boy, did that look inviting. And he got down there and laid his head on that cushion, and he was out like that. He was exhausted. And the disciples probably just sat around there and they talked about what the Lord had been talking about. Probably talked about the healings they had seen and things he was talking about. And I just imagine through their conversation them being completely oblivious to what's going on in the sky off in the distance because a storm's rolling in. And I can kind of sympathize with that. I grew up on the lakes as a kid. I grew up on Webster Lake most of my life, and then I moved and we were on Chapman Lake for a while. But I'm a lake kid, and so I can sympathize with being out on a boat on the lake, skiing or swimming or whatever it is, tubing, and not really paying attention until it's almost too late when the storm starts rolling in and the sky gets dark and the wind picks up. And I can sympathize with the urgency and the fear that you're starting to feel as you're gathering in all your stuff and you're battening down the hatches and you're heading for shore, because you definitely do not want to be out in the middle of the lake in a boat on the water in a lightning storm. That is a dangerous thing. It's bad to be in a body of water in a lightning storm. Makes sense, right? So I can kind of sympathize with these guys as they're in the boat and suddenly this squall comes up before they even realize it, and the wind is blowing and howling, the skies are darkening and the clouds are rolling in, and before anybody can say, hey look, there's a thunderstorm, it's on them. And suddenly they're bombarded with those high winds, there's flashes of dangerous lightning, and the waves are threatening to overcome the boat, to pour in and just dash them to bits and drown them all. So they're panicking and they're bailing out the water as quick as it's coming in, and they look down and there the master is and he's still asleep. Now, is Jesus so tired that he's sleeping through the storm? Or could it be that he's so confident in his power over the storm that he's able to sleep through that? Is it possible that he's so in tune to God that nothing scares him? He's not frightened by the power of the storm because he is the Word of God who brought the world into existence. It was his voice that brought forth the dry land from the water. It was his voice that separated the water from the sky that was now black and fearsome. We're told in the beginning of the Gospel of John that Jesus was with God, and Jesus was God, and he was the Word of God made flesh, and he was there in the beginning when the world was created. But these disciples, they wake the Master up, and they say in verse 38, Teacher, don't you care if we drown? And what they were doing there was they were denying their faith that he was who he said he was, that he was God in the flesh, and he was above all creation in power and majesty. They feared for their lives when they should have been patient and trusting to see what the Mighty One was going to do. Not that I blame them, because as again, I've been out on a boat on the water when a storm's coming up. It is a scary thing. And so the Lord gets up, and I just imagine him standing up in the boat, and the waves are coming up, and the wind is howling, and the lightning's flashing, and he's rubbing his eyes, very calmly. And all this stuff's going on around him, and I can see him stretching his arms out a little bit there, and these guys are in the corner cowering. And the waves are raging, and the wind is howling, the rain is hammering his skin. And he raises those hands, and it says in verse 39, he rebuked the wind and the waves. And I can just see his face. I can see that furrowed brow and that stern glare as the Master of all looks up into the sky. I can see his eyes piercing the darkness as he bellows out, Quiet, be still. And like a scolded puppy, the storm subsides, the wind stops, the waves fall back down into the lake, the rain goes away, and back from behind those dark clouds that are separating, the sun shines once more. And I imagine the Lord turning around in the boat, and he's looking down at all these guys cowering in the clutches of the boat, and I imagine their jaws have dropped into their laps. They're astonished. They've just witnessed a miracle. They've seen the impossible made possible. A man has stood up to a storm that was going to dash them all to pieces, and he had complete mastery and control over it. He took control of a situation that was spinning out of control. He made order restored out of a situation that was utter chaos, and they could not believe what they saw. And so Jesus says to them in verse 40, Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?